What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020, Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner, given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. I also am a featured content provider for the Fly Nubian Queen Network, which has now 570,000 YouTube subscribers, and also soon to be a content provider. And I sit on the advisory board of Indie Soup Media, which is a new media network that is being driven by a good friend of mine, Dr. Tachi, coming out in the next few months. And the reach of that network is over 1 million people. So as always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. We are broadcasting live on February 17th. And you know what? I'm just going to get right to it because we got to do our appetizer. So appetizer time. Aisha K. Staggers. Appetizer time. LaLa Key. What is going on?
Hey.
Oh, good things going on. We got all sorts of madness going on in the States this week.
You know, if this wasn't I guess dedicated edition, there is so much stuff, and I feel bad because you know what's going to happen? You're going to talk about it all on 10 on 10 and not on here. And I don't like that. I don't like that. That's not fair. I'm crying like a little baby.
We had something special this week. So, but you know, that's a nice little teaser for those of you who don't know that we've got things going on in 10 and 10.
There you go. Well, before we go any further, a few things. Primetime Saturday Show store. There is the link. I'll also be sharing it on all the platforms that we're watching this epic conversation on. Also, speaking about 10 and 10, that's where you can check it out at the Patreon. There's the link there. Also, join our Discord group where we continue the conversation in between epic conversations. Also, subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and hit the notification button. Also, like the Dr. Vibe Show on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And also, to advertise your business product or service on any of the platforms that I host, please feel free to email me, dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com. All right.
Wait,
so
before you get to that stuff,
brand
new stuff coming up on the Patreon tomorrow. Like your 3-month stuff.
Oh, okay.
And new stuff coming up tomorrow in the store.
Okay.
Got it already and ready to post.
So before we get into some of the madness that's going on in your country this week, how was everyone's Valentine's Day?
Beautiful.
Oh, you want to share, or are you just going to keep it secret, lover? And I know you already have. You already have your lover's not secret. We know who your lover is. Your hubby.
Yes, no, my hubby's been my hubby for a long time, and plus we've been best friends since we were 14 years old. We went to the art school together, but it never ceases to amaze me how he always shows me love every day. But it's just something about Valentine's. I'm a mushy little Pisces. I'm definitely a romantic.
A mushy little Pisces.
I am. I'm one of those little mushy Pisces mermaids, and he always does something fun, and he always finds something that is meaningful and not just flowers and candy. He always ties things back and does the most lovely posts about our relationship, and so he did that, and it always makes me cry. But I'm also very blessed to have such a wonderful spouse. Because especially in this last year, when I just was feeling so lost, it was good to know that I could experience all my feels with my spouse and my partner. So it's always good to show the world that you love one another. I think it's great to set an example, but it's also really wonderful to know that I have such a beautiful partner.
Aw, that's nice.
Aw.
Well, you know, in our family, Valentine's Day isn't as big because it's the same week as my middle sister's birthday.
Okay.
So my daughter and I, we just ordered food. We sat and we watched movies on just streaming movies, and that's it. And me sitting here figuring out what I'm getting my sister for her birthday, which is tomorrow.
Have you figured out something yet?
I have not. But no, remember we got that box of really lovely black gift cards.
Yes.
And I have
Ebony Occasions.
Yes, Ebony Occasions. And I have one of the birthday cards from it. So I'm definitely giving that to my sister tomorrow. And I'll probably pick her up some flowers. We're gonna go have lunch at my mom's tomorrow. So
nice. And as always, hello, Jen Myers. Hope all is good with you. And Regina, happy for you, LaLa. There we go.
That it really is nice. It really is a blessing because honestly, a lot of people like myself have kind of checked out the dating world for a minute because it's just really not great.
Gotcha. All right. Let's before we go to break, all these trials.
My God.
Where do we begin, right?
Well, first of all, I want to start with the fact that after yesterday's verdict came down, your boy was out here. His first reaction was to rage post about a picture of himself looking rather chubby and called it AI, and then put some AI photos of himself really slimmed down. That was his first reaction.
I have no words for this man. I'm actually glad that all this stuff is happening. And I wanted to see it. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. I'm really curious to see how he's going to come up with all of this money because we all know that he doesn't really have it. And there has actually already been a GoFundMe by his minions that have been put up. But honey, you got to have an awful lot of minions because a lot of his minions are the ones that don't have a lot of money. So, you know, very few people who have money would be willing to support him on this level. People who have money on that level know that they can spend their money in a different place wisely and not on a losing bet. So it's going to be very interesting to see just how much he can grift off of this.
Well, you know, the sad part about it is that, and it's not even the sad part. They will raise the money. He's already putting things in place. He's trying to switch the leadership of the RNC, put his daughter-in-law in. They're gonna, and like she said, their goal is going to be to pay that. And should that man win this race, we will pay for it. Yes. We will pay for it. He will use the country to pay for it because I'm telling you, Ivanka and Jared have that $500 million. Yes, they're not coming up off the cash for him. Okay. Jared already said he wants nothing to do with the White House if he goes in there again. But just for anyone who's not aware, Trump owes $500 million to the state of New York for fraud. Plus it's almost 400 million plus the 100 million in interest.
In the Jean Carroll case.
Yeah, and he has to put plus the Jean Carroll case, 2 Jean Carroll cases. He has to put up 120%, I learned, in order to appeal. He can't even appeal it without putting all the money up, and they hold it in trust. And so he already put up the $5 million in the Jean Carroll, but from what I read, he actually had to go around and try and scrape that up from another source. He's not going to get any kind of bonds company to put up that kind of money for him when him only paying 20%, knowing that he cannot take out loans in the state of New York. Because remember, the bonds person has to be bonded in New York. So how's he going to take out a loan in New York if he can't take out loans in New York?
Right.
And he can't really sell anything because remember,
it's not liquid. He doesn't have a lot of liquid assets.
Nope. The judge slapped the the administrator on any property in his funds, and he has to ask for permission to spend a dime or to sell anything. So he's really kind of stuck, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this is going to go.
It's definitely setting precedent. We're I mean, we're all experiencing something very new, and every day is another adventure. You never know what was going to happen. Actually, I was a little bit shocked at that amount when they announced it. I was pleased with it, but someone posted the other day, someone who I do respect, was like, if you can't even manage your money or do business in New York, how are you going to run a country? And that was a perfectly logical question.
Yes, and someone took it even further last night that I was watching. They said, if you can't manage your money, how are you going to run the country when you have someone who's babysitting your money now? We're supposed to let someone who has a babysitter, a financial babysitter, run the country. We wouldn't let our children do that. So why on earth would that happen? And then there was that case. Then Jack Smith answered the Supreme Court filing the day after the Supreme Court said, "Oh, you have a week to respond." He's like, no, I'm going to do this tomorrow, and he responded to it. And it, people that have read his filing, they suspect that the Supreme Court will not overturn that appeals court that said he has no presidential immunity.
Right.
So that's how tight Jack Smith's filing was on that.
I don't put it past him. I still think Jack has a lot of things up his sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
We won't know until the fat lady things, as they say, but I ain't singing yet, so we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. And so that there's that one, and then there's what?
Fani,
yes.
I'm sorry, but that's my shero right now. I loved I didn't get to watch it live, but I went back and watched every single moment. I loved the way that she handled it. It's really interesting how the public is taking this. Of course, those who are Trump supporters, have everything against her, but everything that they say about her can be thrown right back in their face with whatever Trump has done in his lifetime. But it's very interesting when a strong Black woman who is smart and very well educated stands up and does the same thing that they do by standing up for herself and calling out their lies. All of a sudden, she's got to go down. No. She's doing her job, and she's proving just how ridiculous this whole thing against her is. Now, listen, this has nothing to do with what this case has. They're just trying to discredit her because she's a threat. If she wasn't a threat, they wouldn't be doing this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I actually watched it live, and then part of it I heard in the car as I was driving on Sirius XM. And I'm going to tell you, as a Black woman who's been a professional Black woman, I know professional Black women, your character is always under attack. And this is what this was. And I was glad that she said the thing that she said. I'm not on trial here, although you would like me to be. They're on trial for trying to steal an election. And that is at the heart of this case, okay? Donald Trump is mad because of that fact. He is on trial for this. But he's also on trial for the thing he did in New York when he cheated on his wife. He's conflating the two. All the cases are overwhelming him, and this makes him mad more than anything. So his supporters are like, "Oh, she came off nasty. How would you feel if someone was?
Oh, he's nasty every day.
Exactly.
He's nasty at every turn.
He was so nasty.
He's vicious.
He got kicked off Twitter before Elon Musk bought. Okay, he was that nasty. He's so nasty that his own party they've crumbled underneath the weight of him. So to say that, oh, no, what she was doing was defending herself, and even more, what got me and probably gets Black women and women of color particularly, because I've heard other women of color say this. The thing about the money, not understanding
Yes,
let me tell you something. I keep $25 in my purse, in my wallet, right?
at
And
all times.
at all times, because you were always told, back in the day when we used payphones, keep a dime, keep a quarter with you at all times. Always make sure you have money to call for a ride home or whatever. Have bus fare if you need to take the bus. Have cab fare. If your car breaks down, keep cash on you at all time. Yes, that is a cultural thing. And so just because it's not part of your culture, you don't understand it, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And someone
Right.
made a good point on Twitter. Joel Osteen had $600,000 in cash and gold bars in the walls of his church. And these people are flipping out that Fani Willis had $2,500 in cash on hand.
They can't stand it. My mama called it bra money. Baby, keep your
Mm-hmm.
bra money on you at all times. We are
Yeah.
taught that way because there's a reason that we were taught that way. So don't act stupid that you don't like we don't know how to manage money or to take care of ourselves. They hate that. They really hate that we do have common sense.
Yeah. And that was the other thing too. I found surprising in that whole hearing was the bringing out of her financial situation when they tried to talk about her tax lien of $4,000. Well, if you had the tax lien, if you had cash on hand, how come you didn't pay the taxes? And the judge would say, "What does that have to do with this? That has absolutely
Yes.
nothing to do with this." He said, "We're not going there." And then the other thing was, they tried to talk about the speech she gave on Martin Luther King Day. Well, what did you mean? Judge, we're not going there. That has nothing to do with this. And they also tried to talk about her as if her mismanaging money and not having enough money and all this other stuff. It's like, wait a second. Your client doesn't have enough money. Period.
At
Your client
all, period.
money. Your client doesn't have enough money to pay the $500 million he now owes. And I'm so glad that that judgment came out the same week as his Fani Willis thing when they tried to go after her money.
But she also really held her ground and she was honest about it. And with her knowing the law so well, she was able to say, no, you're not going to misconstrue and you're not going to change. You're going to listen to the answer that you asked me for.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to just glaze over it and make it something that you want it to be. You're going to get the whole answer.
Right. And I love the fact when she said, "Let me tell you, because you lied here and here and here and held up all the documents." And it was a very adversarial interview. And yeah, Fani came in hot, but the woman was very antagonistic, which sometimes we see in these relationships between white women and Black women who compete in the same professional realm. I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've experienced it. I know other
Yeah.
women who've experienced it. And the trying to match her attitude, which came off even worse. And the thing is that her enemy wasn't Fani. It was those men sitting next to her, because she was the only woman on that side interviewing. She should have had a problem with them because they were making her do the heavy lift and kept having to explain
Yeah.
herself, because all the men
Yeah.
that worked with him were there. And I'll just say this last thing on this. The difference you saw with how they treated Fani Willis as a woman and a Black person was
Yes.
evident when the former governor of Georgia took the stand to say that he was her first choice, and he turned it down because he didn't want to have to live with security anymore. So that right there, I think, kills the
Tells you
whole.
everything you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And
well,
they had so much respect for him.
so before we go to break, and I know I have a few we're going to be chatting about this next Saturday, but quick answer from both of you. How would this be different if Fani was a Black man?
I think the woman doing the interviewing and asking the questions would have, she might have been a little nasty, but she would have checked herself.
And
because
that's what I was going to say. She
I
felt like
was
she could check herself over a female, but not over a male.
I was chatting with someone today, and their first one of this, he'd be done. If it was a black man on in that sort of trial, he wouldn't last.
No, because remember, the first person that she interviewed was Wade, was the black male. That was and I watched that. But he was the first one that they called to the stand, and she was very different with him than she was with Fani. With him, she kept tripping up over her questions, having to re-ask the questions. She didn't defer to the judge as much, looking for him to pull her out of things and how things were going, as she did with Fani.
All right.
So, having seen that, I can say that it was different.
Okay, so before we go to break, a lot of people chime in, so I want to shout you out. The Nobody Asks Me Guys show, Dr. Vibe. How am I? I am blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Regina says we should set up Aisha with Van Jones. Now waiting for her to tell me why not. LOL.
You will.
Okay. Okay. No wonder you're not on camera today. All right. Regina says the Saudis will put up the dough for 45.
You'll get it from somewhere.
Yeah, the Nobody Asked Me guy says he's great. Jen says, Dr. Vibe doing well. Hope I am also. David Gonzalez says, hey, la, what's going on? Nobody Asked Me guy says, what's crazy to me is that all of these, quote, superior, unquote, individuals are falling for this grift. Fitness IQ Cam says, good evening, KSF, EYL, RWFQ, FV. JJ Mars says hello from Colorado. What is up? Hope it's warmer. You've brought your Colorado weather to Toronto because it's cold here this evening. Regina says, I just read Fani has a $2.7 million annual income. No way she was expecting her man to pay for everything. Total witch hunt. Let's go for some more comments that are coming through here. Regina also says, clarification, money from her job, real estate portfolio, stock portfolio, etc. Yes, I keep cash on me at all times. My grandma always had brown money, and so do I. Yeah. The lamppost says, hey, fam, what y'all talking about? Got to catch up. We were talking about trials, but we're going to go to break, and then we're going to go all into digital privacy. So hope you have your questions ready. Dr. Tachi mentioned you earlier. She's in the house from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Host and producer of Mediascope on most Wednesdays, 5 p.m. Eastern time on Instagram, then 6 p.m. on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and other platforms. The livest show about media, tech, and pop culture, and the driving force behind Indie Soup Media. Nobody Asked Me guy says if it was a black man, it would be worse. Lamppost says, same as I asked the question, when will black women come together as one, healing ourselves and our families and stop comparing ourselves to others and be ourselves with confidence? All right, good con. Also, Nobody Asked Me guy says he was not the target. He had been the target. They would have tried to crucify him. Lamppost says nobody compares to us. Nobody compares to us to facts. Okay. And Aisha says, a man is not a plan. Okay.
Well, Fani Willis said that. That's what she said. That was
she did.
Yes.
She said, a man is not a plan.
And Fitness IQ Cam says, bra money. Loves it. And Derek says, happy birthday, Huey Puny Newton. All right. Very nice.
February, baby.
All right. So, family, we're not going to be chatting anymore about news until next week, but we're going to go for a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to have a new friend to all you some of you family, but most of you family. We're going to have Monifa Brooks, and she's going to be talking about data privacy. Hope you have your questions ready. I have my questions ready. Do you? So We're going to take a 90-second break. Everyone's going to go for their water like LaLa is, and we're going to be right back. Here we go.
You know, and that's what I feel like. You feel like you're the Harriet Tubman of the mind.
I am.
I feel like I'm one of the Harriet Tubmans of intelligent Black people. Like, I want to liberate y'all from like being left behind and ignored and oblivion. Now, really, the rappers get all the attention. You know, seriously, does anybody else feel this way? Like ignorant Black people, they'll be all up, you know, getting all the headlines on the Shade Room.
Overly sexualized Black folks.
Like the twerkers and the, you know, just people that, you know, don't always represent the best of us, you know, the diversity, you know, like people like Dr. Vibe. Like, everybody should know about people like Dr. Vibe. Dr.
really
Vibe he's trying to do good work for Black people.
Dr. Vibe from Toronto. Good to see you, my brother. Dr. Vibe. Everybody follow Dr. Vibe. He has a great show. He's very good at what he does, and I have a lot of respect for him.
Okay, so let me hop into this. What's up, Dr. Vibe? How you doing? Everybody, if you see Dr. Vibe in the chat, everybody go follow the Dr. Vibe show. Dr. Vibe is a real smart brother and a good human being. I like the guy a lot, and he's very intelligent. And I think everyone should pay attention to what he's got going on. We got to shine the spotlight on the intelligent Black people out here that are really doing the good work. Don't just pay attention to the rappers and the celebrities. You know, a lot of these people are losers. Your true winners are your people in your community that are really having your back. You know, helping us to have stronger families and a stronger community. So Dr. Vibe is in that category. So you might see the Dr. Vibe show in this chat. If you see him, please go follow him. Okay. All right. So anyway.
All right. We are back. Primetime Saturday with Aisha and LaLa, broadcasting live on February 17th. Got a few more comments that comes in here. All this knowledge with no power. Yes, but we can apply it. We can apply it. All right. Let's get to it. So we haven't done, I don't know if we've ever done this on a Saturday night where we've had a special friend or new friend come on and basically drop knowledge. But I thought this young lady would be a great person to have on. I actually have known her digitally for about a year and a half, 2 years. And just this past week, we finally met face to face after about a year and a half of I have the blessing of help amplify her business. So I'm going to do a little bit of intro. I'm not going to go to the long version. It could get long, but I'm not going to go too far. So today and this evening, wherever you're watching this, we have Monifa Brooks, co-founder and principal of Garabyte Consulting. Garabyte Consulting works with companies to build programs and processes that protect personal data. She is passionate about enabling innovation while ensuring compliance with privacy obligations to build customer trust and confidence. She's an advocate for privacy awareness and volunteers her time with various school boards and nonprofit organizations across Ontario. This is where I live, and this is where she lives, Canada, everybody, educating high school students about the importance of data privacy. She's an alumni of the PricewaterhouseCoopers Women in Leadership program. She's a seasoned expert in access and data privacy compliance with extensive background developing and implementing privacy programs, leading business transformation in alignment with new regulations, responsible use of data insights and analytics, as well as breach management. Before that, before she did the Garabyte thing, she worked for a private sector organization leading privacy, compliance, and risk assessments to enable the use of cutting-edge technologies and advanced data privacies. So she's the real deal, family. I know the company she worked for. I ain't going to say who it is, but they're a major telecommunications company in Canada. That's it. In that role, she interacted with various regulatory authorities and was the project lead overseeing any remediating compliance orders for almost a decade. She helped operationalize all aspects of the privacy program, implement a CASL compliance regime, implement technology solutions, and manage compliance for unsolicited telecommunication rules. Last paragraph, family, because I have to give her full respect. Her unique combination of regulatory compliance, risk management, process improvement, and project management allows her to find practical solutions for any business. She holds her International Association of Privacy Professionals, Certified Privacy Professional, Canada, and Certified Information Privacy Manager, CIMP designation. She also holds a Six Sigma Green Belt Certified. Yes, you said it's long, but she's worthy. Welcome to Primetime Saturday. Monifa Brooks, what is up?
Happy Saturday. I am so happy to be here with all of you. It's very exciting.
This is good. Actually, I have to do one more thing. I have to shout out some people. Christy White and Wendy Harris. Also want to say they're favoring. So how are you? I was gonna say how you doing?
I am well medicated, but I'm up to the job.
Okay. No problem. So family, especially if you're watching this live, and Aisha and LaLa, bring the noise, bring the questions. I have a number of them, so I don't know. Okay, you know what I'm gonna say, Monifa, how did you start off getting the role of data privacy, or it's in England, data privacy? Because we don't see many Black women in this area. Why? What's the interest?
And it's a funny story. I stumbled upon this space, and it's one of the reasons why I've spent so much time speaking at high schools and various other spaces just about the fact that this is even a career opportunity. Because frankly, growing up, I did not know this was a job. I didn't know it was a real thing. And it was while working regulatory compliance, that's when I learned about data privacy. And it was like, oh, this stuff's actually really interesting. And just the way that you can support innovation and technology and development, I found it was such a fascinating space. I was like, this is truly what I want to do.
All right. People, jump in whenever you want. So what was the first opportunity you had to work in this space?
So while I was working with my previous organization, I was supporting regulatory compliance for all consumer type issues. So anything that had to go before our parliament and our regulators, talking about changes at the telecommunications level that was going to be company wide. My job was to help support and argue for, why things should lean in favor of our company and our strategy. And it was through that job that my boss at the time, she ended up moving into a role that made her the chief privacy officer. So her portfolio was expanding. And she's like, okay, so, our team is going to change if you want to come on this road and join this journey. After doing some research on it, I was like, yeah, I think this journey makes sense. For me, I like where it's going. I also like the expanded scope of responsibility that was going to come with it. It provided me a lot more exposure and access to working directly with the regulators in terms of remediation and going through different types of investigation and being able to identify, okay, what are ways that we can be more innovative and how we can be better when it comes to protecting personal information.
You mentioned regulation in terms of data privacy, but you do this internationally. What's the difference between, I know you do in the UK, here, Canada, what's the difference in terms of how data privacy is regulated across those three, and who has the tighter regulation?
So right now, I'm definitely going to say that my hat goes off to the EU and the UK. They have definitely been leading in this space when it comes to putting people at the center of their privacy regulations. They led the charge with the GDPR back in 2018, and that was really the first time we saw any data privacy regulations that were focused on ensuring that people had controls in place to actually protect their own personal information and have greater access to what was happening with their information. When we think about privacy at just a broad level, it's such a gray space for a lot of people because, everything is sent to you in a privacy policy that was written typically in a very legalese format. So you pretty much needed a lawyer to understand anyone's privacy policies prior to the enforcement of the GDPR. And when the GDPR came out, and because of the extraterritorial scope, right? It's not just specific to people who are living in the EU or in the UK when it comes to their Data Protection Act. It had an extraterritorial reach for anyone who was doing business in an area where you were going to be collecting personal information for their data subjects. So as a result of that, it really kind of transformed how people spoke about privacy and how people thought about privacy controls within their organizations. And then because if you are a global company, let's say you're a Meta, as an example, where you are doing business in all these different countries around the globe, you now have this high bar, and it in many cases is just easier to apply that high bar across the board to make sure that you can turn those controls on and off, or apply them just as a blanket to everybody. So in many ways, the GDPR setting that high bar is really what kind of elevated not only what regulators were thinking across the board, but also what companies were thinking across the board if they were operating on a global level. Since the GDPR came into force, I will say that many US states have also done a really great job in terms of following suit. When we look at California as a great example, just in terms of how they have followed suit quickly, not copied the GDPR, but they have use that as, like, I want to say, as a guidance, but they've definitely taken their own approach to it to make sure that it is something that's tailored for Californians. Canada, rather unfortunately, we are still behind the ball on this one. We're still under review at the federal level, but I can say that one of our provinces, so Quebec, they have gone out with their own updated data privacy regulations that I want to say are very GDPR-like. So they're also very focused on providing consumer rights as well.
Okay, I want to jump in. Some people may not know, what is GDPR? What does it stand for? Because we're in your world now.
Sorry, that's also right. I have to remember not to use acronyms.
Got it.
So that's the General Data Protection Regulations.
Okay. And what's the history behind that?
Everyone in the European Union.
Okay. So, LaLa, any questions yet? Because I'm ready to go.
I do. Aisha asked one of my main questions, but one of my things is what is this information actually being used for? That's where most people just glance through the terms of service, and most people don't realize what exactly all of their data is being used for, and how is this new change with cookies going away soon going to affect us all?
So the interesting thing about how personal information is used is that, and one of the greatest examples I have is if you think about Instagram as an example, a lot of people use that app. Have you ever been speaking around your apps and then you notice all of a sudden you are getting ads that kind of seem tailored to what you were just talking about? As an example, I remember a friend of mine, she was talking about buying a jacket for her son as she was like scrolling through an app. And then within less than 24 hours, she started seeing ads that were trying to get her to buy the very jacket she was just talking about, right? So this comes down to, as you mentioned, everyone just kind of clicks through terms of service without really reading them. When you download most of these social media apps, their microphone setting is usually turned to on. That microphone is listening to you, but it's listening to you for marketing purposes because it wants to gather more data about you. The saying as it goes right now is that data is the new oil, right? The more I know about you is the more I can monetize what I know about you, and the more I can make money off of you, because that's the type of society that we live in. So the type of personal information that's being collected can vary, and it depends on the type of relationship that you're going into with whatever that business or organization is. So for social media, they usually upfront gather basic information about you, such as name, date of birth, geographic location, gender. So it's usually pretty standard information. However, that can then be layered with secondary sources, as well as just better understanding, what are you scrolling through? What are the things that interest you? Because now I can use that information to create a profile about you, and create a profile about people who might be like you. So that way, again, I can just monetize that information better. Facebook is free as a platform because it monetizes the information it knows about people so that it can serve ads to you based on what it knows you like, because it has such a huge database of all this demographic data about you.
So how do you turn that microphone off that you just mentioned? It's like people don't know it's on. Now that we know, how do we turn it off?
So, and this is also, Apple, I would say, took the lead on this a few years ago when they started doing privacy by design, where they were now doing everything off as automatic and you would have to turn them on. Most people, again, when you're like signing up for apps, you're really not paying attention to whether or not it's tracking you always or only while you're using the app, or, you know, never. I mean, so Apple has taken an approach at trying, but for the most part, depending on what type of software you're using, some of these things might still be on anyways if you're not on the Apple platform, or if you haven't paid attention as you were going through. But unless we're having these conversations about how to take control of how your information is used, most people aren't aware of these settings. And then I do just want to say, separate of that, like I have teenagers, and we've had these conversations about like tailored ads versus non-tailored ads. My son is somebody who, he doesn't mind the microphone, because for him, he's like, I would rather you serve me ads that make sense to me than serve me ads that don't make sense to me. So for some people, they're okay with their information being monetized if they feel the trade-off is worth it, but it's not for everyone.
You just explained something to me now that I like didn't understand what they were doing it for. Now I know that whenever I download an app and I see while in app, don't allow, always, in the small writing you can't see, but you see that, and I always check don't allow. So
yes,
okay, good information.
There you go. Just two of the families saying hello. Jen Meyer says, welcome, Monifa. And
thank you.
Dr. Tiachi, who you do know of, says,
Hi,
hello,
Dr. Tachi.
Monifa. I've got a question, if I'm allowed to ask. Usually I don't get a chance to chat during these things with the ladies, but I'm putting my nose in this time. So let me ask, how do data privacy issues disproportionately affect Black communities compared to other demographic groups, or do they?
So I would say that they can, and it's because it's part privacy and also just part ethics, right? So when we're thinking about privacy and how personal information is used, we also need to think about the ethics behind some of that and bias that can seep into the technologies that we use. So facial recognition software, as an example, it can be used for a lot of things. Like I've seen security companies use it so that they can, you know, secure their premises. But that technology wasn't built in a way that, you know, addresses the bias that was built into those systems. So we already have lots of examples out there where facial recognition software isn't detecting all types of people, and it is not identifying all types of people correctly. So if we're going to live in a space where your personal information it's going to be captured because the software is being used, right? But then it could wrongfully or incorrectly identify you for something because it wasn't programmed or structured correctly. That isn't to anybody's benefit, right? Like that doesn't help create a better society. And then you also have to look at the data analytics that comes from, you know, the personal information that's gathered. So let's just say we're looking at a city and we are looking at crime rates as an example. If there's already over policing in a particular area, it's going to show higher crime rates than an area that has under policing. And that the data analysis that can come from that can send you down a rabbit hole that creates new policies that only compound the existing bias, right? And all of that is going to be based on the personal information that was collected in order to be the foundation of that data. So whenever we think about privacy and what are the real world implications, the privacy issues become compounded if we're not putting the right structures in place in the first place, and we're not vetting the data and making sure that bias has been accounted for in that data.
So considering that we're in an election year here, how are they going to use the technology to market to us, and how are they going to abuse this technology? What do you see are the potential gaps for you taking this data and all this information that they have on people to kind of influence how people will vote?
So, and this is something that policymakers have already started taking a look at, especially when we think about AI and just how artificial intelligence has already been demonstrated as being used to have influence when it comes to the political space. So we already just recently saw there were calls going out that definitely had President Biden's voice, that were trying to encourage people towards a particular action, but it wasn't him. It was artificial intelligence created. And we've already seen how that's seeped into this space. So knowing that artificial technology can be used to replicate voice, it can be used to replicate image, you can create videos out of all those things. If we now layer that into a space where I can serve ads to a particular demographic using whatever social media platform I want, if we don't have the right controls in place to identify the real from the fake, our world is only going to continue to shift into a more divisive space. So personally in my own life, I don't use a lot of social media. And the reason I don't use a lot of social media is because I don't like algorithms learning me. I don't think that's healthy. I like to live in a world full of rainbows and sunshine. And find that social media, despite the fact that I was trying to curate my social media to a particular set of rainbows and sunshine, it kept trying to seep other things in to my algorithm based on what people I know might be interested in. Because again, the algorithm's only job is to learn you and to learn what's happening in your circle. As people, we tend to already live in a very isolated bubble and not always allow differing opinions in. So as a result, the algorithm learns too much about you. And then it starts to bring these other things in, whether they're real or they're fake. It's bringing things in that are feeding you towards a particular way that will either just continue to compound on beliefs that you already had or just make you angry. And especially when, we're taught to trust what we've seen, right? So if this artificial intelligence can be used and manipulated in a way as a result of these algorithms knowing what to feed you and when, because it knows, you've just seen X video. So now if I show you this video, you're really going to be hooked and you're really going to go down that rabbit hole. It's going to be a very slippery slope. And we've not yet identified a way to put proper controls around how the AI technologies are being used. I think it's fantastic that we have them because they have so much potential. But as with everything, right? There is a dark side that, and I don't want to use that word, but there is a nefarious side that can happen where things go down a path that we won't be able to get back from.
All right. Just going to interrupt here. 2 comments here. JJ Marr says, eventually a lot of this information can be used for fraudulent purposes. Mm-hmm. I've been the victim of identity theft. Whoa. And Sandusky, Ohio Bro says they abuse the ADOS movement of being Russian and AI. Okay. And JJ Marr says more sophisticated ways of ID theft.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Ladies, more questions? I got some if we need to back up.
No, I've got one.
Okay.
And it is, we have, as you get educated, as we're learning things, especially through you and our questions, we understand that, you have to read through those terms of service. Well, say we learn something that we don't like after we've accepted those terms. Is there a way to retract your acceptance with changes?
So yes, and it really depends on what your relationship is with that organization, right? So let's think about the example of a streaming platform. With a streaming platform, I have to provide a certain amount of information. I have to give you my name. I have to give you payment information. I have to give you my geographic information. And I have to give you my email address. Those are the things that I have to give you in order for you to provide me the service. I can't take back that information unless I stop being your customer, because you need that information in order to fulfill that service with me. There are lots of times when you sign up for a service and information is optional, but you can provide it anyway. Again, it's up to you. But you also have to think about, is it truly necessary for us to fulfill that service? And at what point is it necessary? Another example I'll provide. So here in Canada, if you're signing up for telecommunication services, when you are signing up for the service, you have to provide your name, your address. Depending on how you're getting the service, you may have to provide billing information. But if it's postpaid, you will have to provide 2 pieces of identification so that you can have a credit evaluation completed. Once your credit evaluation has been completed, you get the service. Technically, you don't need to keep my 2 pieces of ID on file anymore because you already fulfilled the purpose under which you collected it. So I have every right to request that you now remove that information because you no longer have a purpose for keeping it. So when we think about what information we provided a company and what they needed it for, which if you go through the privacy policies, which in many cases, they are being written a lot better now, take a look at what you're collecting and what's the use. Once the use case has been fulfilled, I have every right, depending on the region in which you live, to ask that that information no longer be retained in your system because it's no longer necessary. And all these companies, if you are operating in a jurisdiction where you have data privacy regulations, you also have to have proper retention timelines where you're actually deleting information. This is an area where a lot of companies end up running afoul when it comes to data privacy, and they also get themselves in a lot of trouble when it comes to data breaches. If you are holding on to unnecessary information, you are a hacker's dream, okay? Because you just have a ton of data for no reason that they could access. A lot of the companies I think about that have had breaches, they're hanging on to data from like the early 2000s. There is no reason for you to have that data if for no other reason than it's expensive to hang on to data that you don't need. All these like data servers that you're paying for, if you don't need that data, just get rid of it. Put everybody out of their misery. Just get rid of that information. But regardless of what those companies do, it's important that people know, depending on where you live, you do have the right to request that that information be deleted. You also have the right to request to access the information that a company holds about you, and they have to provide that with you. That's actually one of the reasons why if you do have a social media account, you can request a copy of all the data that you've like stored there. So like if you've like posted pictures and like you can request and download a copy of that file.
Interesting. Now, I have a little bit of a different situation because I travel globally. I'm back and forth between the EU and America quite a bit, but I depend really heavy on my computer for all of my information. How can I best protect myself when I'm going across country lines and each rule? EU is great. They do a lot of good protections, but how do I know that I'm being protected at the best level when I'm traveling?
So when I think about how you want to protect your own personal data, you definitely want to make sure that how you're sharing your personal information is usually in an encrypted format if you have to share it at all. You want to make sure that, like I'm guessing most of your stuff will probably be on a laptop, that you have proper password protection on your laptop, that you have antivirus, that you've put the proper technological safeguards into your own equipment. Be very on the alert for spam and like phishing attacks, because that is huge. That is one of the number one ways in for fraudsters. And just be conscious of where you're sharing your personal information. A lot of times people overpost on social media. So a lot of things about them, such as your what we call tombstone data. In most cases, like if you think about like your bank, if your credit card was hacked or something like that, or fraudulently used, and you had to call into your bank to get things corrected, they're going to ask you what we consider to be your tombstone data, your date of birth, your last 4 digits of your social security number. They're going to be asking for things that might not be readily available to others. But if you're somebody who is oversharing on social media, and everybody knows your mother's maiden name, and everybody knows the name of the last street you lived on, it becomes harder and harder for you to protect yourself in some of those more basic ways.
Very interesting. Do VPNs help at all?
Yes and no. VPNs, I think, are great when it comes to limiting different browsers' access to your location and things along those lines. It also makes sure that any information you're transmitting is also going to be protected and encrypted. So I definitely think they have a benefit. But one of the things I find myself telling companies all the time is we can spend a ton of money on technological safeguards. But if we're not doing the basics on educating ourselves for what threats actually look like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can have a VPN, but if you're going to click on that phishing link because it told you that, oh, you've got a package or you've got a refund,
Right.
got no refund coming. They're never going to send you a link with a refund, but you clicked on it
Right.
anyway. What difference does it make if you have a VPN?
So speaking of that was going to actually be my next question. How do we avoid, first of all, getting those things? We get them in the email, we get them, sometimes they'll text you, what have you. How do we decipher what's real versus what's not? Because the other thing is that sometimes, you'll see, like, I get a text from my apartment complex leasing office when I have a package, and then there will be other times where I'll see something that says, oh, you have a package, but it's trying to get you to click on a website. And I know that's not it. But what do people need to know to decipher between what's real and what's not?
So personally, for myself, I start off with the assumption that everything is phishing. Everything is phishing until you've proven otherwise to me. So what I mean by proven otherwise to me is I need to actually check the true sender. So a sender can be masked, right? It'll show up as one thing, but if you actually click into like who the from is in the email and see the full email address, now you can see it's, something that's not spelt right. Like you can clearly tell this is not from anybody I know. You truly are phishing. Leave that alone. Something you just mentioned as well is like in regards to the format. So that, yes, you do get shipping or mail notifications, but they have a particular format. If this does not match that format, start with the assumption that it is fake. You have to just take a look at, does it have any grammar, spelling errors? That's usually like the number one. But with AI, I've seen they are getting a lot better. And they're also, I've noticed again with AI that they're being very quick to catch on to like just what's a trend. So as an example, we had one of our major telecommunications companies out here in Canada, I think it was like 2 years ago, we had like a major outage that was like a whole day long. And then following that outage, they did provide a credit that was applied to like the next invoice. And I think it had been mentioned in like an invoice or something like that, but it had been covered all over the media. So anytime I notice now that there is any talk on X, formerly Twitter, about out-of-service outages, I will see a lot of phishing text messages come in saying, oh yeah, like, sorry for the outage, we're going to give you $50. Just based on the fact that I have been a customer with this particular company for over 18 years, I know that they don't give out $50 because you had a 5-minute outage. I know this to be a fact of life. Therefore, I start with the assumption that it is always fake. Right. Unless there is a major outage, I know they are not giving me $50.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I see that often. I realize that that's got to be some kind of tracking something to know that this is how I'm alerted, or this is how my complex alerts people about their packages. Now, what about when you get those alerts from your medical, your healthcare facility? Because we have those, because then, you start getting them quite often. We had a breach here, Yale Hospital had a breach here with healthcare things, and people weren't necessarily sure that it was real or not. Of course, it was covered in the news. We see that, and we see the same thing happening with banks. What are some of the best practices to protect ourselves from this kind of activity, whether it's real or if it's phishing?
Again, any message, whether it's a text message or an email that is directing you to click on a link, do not click on the link. If you believe this is coming from a trusted source, pick up the phone and actually call them. Call your bank. Call your bank and ask, did you send this? Like, is this what's going on? I would rather you spend that half hour on hold with your bank and get that verification. And again, during their standard hours, not their off hours, where they're usually like farming that work out to somebody who may not be aware. So during their standard hours, just do that follow-up phone call to verify, is this real? As part of my previous role, I did help the company a lot when it came to structuring messages, because something that I think organizations need to be aware of is what fraudulent messages look like, right? Like if you as an organization are aware of what fraudulent messages look like, you will make sure that you are tailoring your messages in a far better way. As an example, and like I touched on this before, so if card has been compromised, you're usually going to get a call from like the fraud department from whatever banking institution it is. These institutions are going to call you. They're going to ask you a bunch of questions that usually sound like highly scripted. And, in fairness, they sound a little fishy, even though they're the real people. Those calls sound a little fishy. And they sound a little fishy now because the fraudsters have like kind of mastered that script, right? So they also sound a little bit fishy. These organizations, if they just change their script ever so slightly to say, this is so-and-so calling from the fraud department, you can check your card. You will see the number where you can call us back, give this case number, and anyone can help you. That would make life so much easier. Why? Because a fraudster is never going to tell you to call the number on the card. The fraudster is going to try and hold you on that phone and get all the information out of you during that conversation. If we want to change the habits, I think organizations also need to help support the public in regards to what that shift looks like. Let's create a system where we can actually verify, trust but verify.
But that would require hiring people, right? And so they don't want to cut into the profit.
There you go.
Good stuff. I just want to jump in. Got some comments here. Regina says, I noticed that Google Mail now uses a different font for any mail that is phishing. Fitness IQ Camp says, I'm loving these tips. JJ Mars from Colorado asks, well, he says, I read somewhere that a computer scientist said it is impossible to delete data. There's always some way to retrieve or resuscitate data. Is that true?
No, it is possible to truly delete, but it is up to the company to properly do that. So most companies, what they'll do because they don't want to delete data is they will de-identify the data so they can continue to use it for analytics purposes. But you can truly delete the data.
All right. I'm going to jump in because I got a few questions I want to ask here. So let me ask you, can you explain some common misconceptions about data privacy and how they may impact Black individuals?
Let's see. Well, so I'd say the main misconception about data privacy is that it's the exact same as data security. They are completely different. Data security is a subset of data privacy because that's about the physical controls to protect the data, whereas data privacy on a broader scope is about how you collect it, how you use it. It is how long you retain it. It's the purposes of why. it is more than just the protection of the personal information, I'd say is like the first misconception. And how does that impact our community? I would say it, so for me and in my experience so far, I see the impact in the fact that we have so many creative people in the Black community, as well as so many entrepreneurs in the Black community. I've seen a lot of really great businesses that have come about before even the pandemic, but a lot of really great Black owned and operated organizations where they don't know that they actually have requirements when it comes to how they're processing personal information for their employees. So they have built, great businesses that are definitely securing data. But just because you have protected data does not mean you have done the right things with data. It doesn't mean that you have the consent to collect any of the information that you have collected, or that you are processing it in a way that, actually aligns with the reason it was collected. As an example, like if you own an organization and you have security cameras that are operating both inside and outside of your organization, where are those security cameras pointed? Do the people, across the street who have just gone to the convenience store across the way and have nothing to do with your organization know that not only have you collected their image, but you're also doing facial recognition and demographic scanning on the image that you've collected? And again, because you didn't know that you even had to put policies in place to explain what you were doing. So for me, one of the biggest challenges has been just trying to educate people on what are the things that you need to know to make sure that you're operating in a way that makes sense. One of the questions at the top we started talking about was, what are the countries that are taking data privacy more seriously? And I definitely said the UK and the GDPR. It's because they have huge fines for non-compliance. The way that I see this impacting our community is because as these privacy regulations are more broadly adopted across the globe, all the fines are coming with them, right? Again, if the Black community, we have all these startups and businesses that we're running, whether they're small or mid-size or large-size companies, if we aren't ahead of the game when it comes to how we're implementing our data privacy controls and our programs, the fines are going to impact us the most.
Really good. Got another conversation piece for you. What role does systemic bias and discrimination play in data collection and privacy violations, especially for Black individuals?
I would say that they help reinforce stereotypes, right? Because data, like even when we think about artificial intelligence is learning from, data and images that already exist out there, right? If the bias is already here and we are training you on data that is biased, we are only then going to further escalate that bias in ways that are amplified because of the way that technology has amplified. If we think about, just like when ChatGPT was first launched, and you're like, okay, ChatGPT, show me pictures of like professionals, and you're only seeing white people, that's because of the data that it was trained on, right? So whereas if you asked it, oh, show me a criminal, it's going to show you a particular type of person because of the data that it was trained on. So then if we're going to use that technology to what do you call it, to start doing other jobs for us because it can do that computing power a lot faster, think about how that would amplify the biases that are already seen in society. If a caseworker has bias, but a caseworker can only go through so many cases in a day, but I now replace that caseworker with AI who is built in with the same biases, but that AI technology can go through 1,000 cases per day. The reach is it's much further, and it ends up penetrating the system in ways that are, they just expand and they compound because of the bias that hasn't already been addressed. Like when we talk about, so data quality is one of the components of any proper privacy framework. And it's trying to make sure that the data that you have is actually accurate. If your data isn't accurate, you have no data analytics. Like, that is the whole basis of it. You have to have accurate data. And if your data doesn't make sense, then you have to start from scratch.
Ladies?
So once our security has been breached, because you hear a lot, your security has been breached. What do you need to know about that? Because the next thing you see is, oh, your security was breached. Now we have a class action lawsuit. What do we do? Well, fine, I understand you're doing a class action, but I want to know exactly how that impacts me. Perfect example. I am a 23andMe consumer.
So you were impacted.
I've done. I'm sorry. So how I know that was breached.
Yes.
So I need to know how that would affect me, and what are some things that I need to look out for?
So going back to that 23andMe breach, I want to just to set the stage properly and what happened there. 23andMe was breached because of something that's called like password credential stuffing, basically. And this is something I preach about all the time. Stop using the same passwords all over the place. When people use the same usernames and the same passwords, and then these companies get breached, if company A over there got breached, if I'm a hacker, I can get that data. I can buy that data. That's no problem. I can then use that data and just have my AI technology just plug it in on a whole bunch of different sites. And whenever I get a hit, okay, now I can access you here. Now I can access you here because I know you're one of those people who uses the same passwords all over the place, right? So that's like the first thing that I just want to get out there as we set the stage, is that if people weren't using the same passwords all over the place, we wouldn't run into so many of these issues. At the same time, if companies had multi-factor authentication, so even after you've put in your username and your password, I now have to send you a code by email, by whatever, it could also reduce those things, right? So there's something to be done on both sides in terms of making sure that these things don't happen. With that being said, once you have been involved in a breach and your information has been compromised, this is where you need to start taking a look at, what are the data sets that this organization had about me? You can get that information either just based on what you know you've provided, or you can actually put in a request to their privacy office to request access to all the information that they had about you. Because depending on the type of information that has been compromised is really what should drive your action. If your bank is someplace that has been compromised, you need to think about like changing everything, obviously, but you also want to make sure that you have like some credit monitoring that is going to monitor anything that's happening in your credit activity to understand, like how far is this going to spread, right? So that way you can stay on top of it. But if it was just like maybe you have like a social media account where you don't have a lot of personal information, you might not think about credit monitoring in that space, but they have a password and a username. Is that something that you're using someplace else? Do you need to think about changing those things, right? So it really depends on what's the information that's been compromised. How can you protect yourself based on the information that's been compromised? And what do you need to change based on the information that's been compromised?
So if when this information is compromised and people and they send you notifications and things like that, what is their responsibility on their end to help you protect your privacy?
So at each organization, it will be different because it really comes down to what's the data set that's been compromised. So depending on where you are situated, there are usually regulations around breach notification requirements, and it will outline what is the organization responsible for in terms of notification. So when do they have to notify you, and what do they have to notify you about? Here in Canada, they have to notify you if there is a real risk of significant harm. I don't know that I like that threshold, simply because I think people can determine what's a real risk of significant harm, and they can see that differently, right? Like, I think you can argue either side of that coin. So I'm not sure it's the best threshold, but that is the threshold that we're working with. If they do believe there's a real risk of significant harm, they have to tell you what happened. They have to tell you what was compromised, and they have to provide you some way of, mitigating this. So most of the things that we see here on this side of the border is that they will usually provide some type of credit monitoring depending on the sensitivity of the information. If they're not providing some form of credit monitoring, it's usually then in the case that they probably wouldn't be notifying you because they don't see it as a real risk of harm. But it usually just depends on what type of data has actually been compromised. And because, if I'm thinking about a company, a social media company where, maybe what was breached was your username, your email address, your password, possibly your photos, they might not, like, the company could argue that it's not a real risk of significant harm. Whereas I could argue that it is a real risk of significant harm if my pictures and everything are just all out there, all willy-nilly, right? So it really just depends on how people are arguing it. And it's also one of the other reasons why you'll usually see a lot of class action lawsuits that come about as a result of that, because the company is going to do what companies do. And that's usually going to try to argue as to why it is, the breach happened, but it's minimal. And, you weren't really impacted because they don't want to have to pay out. So it's just easier to play it down.
All right. I'm going to jump back in for a moment. Nichelle, like that name. I say $263 a day by deleting 4 apps I didn't, even though I still had. So, and changing from Geico to USAA. Don't know what that impacted her, but she deleted some apps and she saved some money. And Dr. Tachi asked, so why don't companies do more with multi-factor authentication to prevent such breaches?
Oh, I can't even tell. Okay, so
Okay.
thing with organizations come down to dollars and cents. Just like the conversation we had about why aren't like when the fraud departments of banks are calling out, why are they calling out to say, oh, this is your case number, call us back and whatever? It's because they don't want to spend more money. Setting up multi-factor authentication isn't cheap. And for a lot of companies, it is, especially if we think about like companies that are operating in that like startup tech space. They're trying to do it quick. They're trying to get to market. Implementing a complicated multi-factor authentication is going to be more costly. And they don't see the benefit in it. I try to tell companies it is far more sensible to build your infrastructure up front, build in your privacy and your security by design. Really think through these journeys and what they look like and what they feel like. Make sure that you're only collecting the information that is necessary and you're only keeping it for as long as is necessary. Those are the things that you do to truly protect yourself and protect your consumers. But when you are trying to make sure that you are maximizing profits and minimizing expense, no, you're not going to put multi-factor authentication in place because securing your customer isn't your end goal. Making money is your end goal.
Facts, big time facts there. So actually, I'm gonna go into this, and this is old hash for myself from Monifa, but I'll give a real life experience, and I'll share it with the family here. And I called Monifa and say, "What's this going on about?" So there is a platform here in Canada that I've used for a few years, and then this year when they asked me to re-up or re-sign up for it, they asked me for my passport picture. And this is a third party. So they have a third party that does verification. So they not only ask for my business number, they ask for my passport photo. Then they ask me to take a picture of myself to verify the picture in the passport photo. And I said, this is ridiculous. And even crazier, I've used this service before. So they already have some data, especially they have my business number. And I said to Monifa, what is up with this? So Monifa, tell the people what you came back to me with in regards to this situation.
And see, and that one was another wild one. And it really ties into what I was saying before is we have to it's great to have these technologies. So the organization was implementing this technology because they said their stated goal was to reduce fraudulent participation on their platform, which is great. Absolutely, you know, it's a valid purpose. So they enlisted the use of this third-party company to do ID verification for them. In looking at this third-party company, so this company is not actually, it's not embedded in any system. So I'm going to give you my driver's license. I'm going to give you my passport. You're not vetting that with anything. If you go through their privacy policy, it actually just said all they're really doing is they're going to take a look at your selfie that you take, and they're going to look at the picture on your ID, and they're going to compare those two. And if they match up, then you're good to go. Doesn't mean I did not fake that ID. Like there's like, so your stated purpose and what's actually happening, they don't add up, right? Like it started to fall apart. So now you are over collecting unnecessary information from me because what you said you were trying to do still isn't being done. If you said you're trying to reduce fraud, this does not reduce fraud. So why are you collecting my information? And then furthermore, when we go further into their privacy policy, like you're going to hold on to that information for a few years before you even delete it. If your stated purpose is to just make sure that, you know, my ID matches up, you've done that. Now you can delete my information.
But they're not doing it, is what you're saying.
They're not doing it. So now if this rinky-dink little company ends up having a breach, you have my passport information out there.
Oh, wow.
I love the look on LaLa's face right now because LaLa is very much engrossed in social media.
You know, I had a massive hack about 3 years ago on my Facebook. And to be in the throes of that nightmare was so frustrating. I literally lost sleep over it. Because they had control of my personal videos. They manipulated them to make them seem like I was saying something. Of course, you know, it was for Bitcoin because that's all the rage 3-4 years ago. And for 4 months, I went through trying to get my account back. And Facebook was no help, none at all. They had no one to help me. They wanted me to continue to upload my driver's license and things of this nature when it was nothing but an endless loop. So what happens to us when we don't have the customer service that is really supposed to be helping us during these hacks? Because I can't help anybody else. I mean, everybody keeps asking me, how did you get your account back? And I just keep saying by the grace of God, because I think I bugged them so much 24 hours a day that was finally like, give this girl her password back and so that she can change everything. But then I went in and saw all the damage that was done, and it was a lot. So how do we protect ourselves when companies like Facebook, yes, I am saying it, are not helping to protect us either?
And I think, honestly, that example is a very common one. And the lack of customer service supported by real people there's nobody to escalate to. There's nobody to get in contact with. So in many cases, like I've seen people just give up and start new profiles altogether because they have no mechanism in place to getting those things back. And rather unfortunately, on the two examples that I know where people did get it back, it's because they ended up finding somebody who worked for the organization. And that's how they were able to get things escalated. So like, not everybody knows somebody who works for that company. So you can't get your information back, right? Like it ends up being a very lengthy process. And like, again, I can't stress enough the importance of being vigilant about the accounts that you take seriously. But even more so, be vigilant for the accounts that you don't take seriously. Most people, you guard your online banking with a certain level of protection because it is your online banking. That is your finances. But you're not thinking about, oh yeah, I created that email account that I never really use, and it's just for my spam messages. Be vigilant about all your personal information. Because if any of it is misused, usually what ends up happening is if I'm the hacker or the person who has nefarious intent, I'm going to get into the accounts that you guard the least as my way in to the accounts that you guard the most.
So I have set up everything to have two-factor at all costs.
Good.
But I've noticed recently in the last week, my Microsoft has actually been getting hacked, trying to get hacked into, and I get alerted with, hey, here's your single code. If it wasn't you, and this is a good question, if it wasn't you, don't worry, you're protected. Okay, well, somebody just tried to get in my stuff. So should I worry still and go in and do something different to maybe change the password even after I got that message?
So the good thing about getting that message is, I mean, one, you know that people are trying and it's not working, which is good. So like that's definitely a good sign. But also just think about, you know, so if you're thinking about your Microsoft account, think about how your user ID and password is set up for that account. Is it one that you are using across multiple spaces, like anything like that? And I mean, for me, like, I try to make sure that I'm changing my passwords on a regular cadence anyways. So that's usually a good time to think, okay, like here, people are trying. So maybe this is a reminder for me that this is a good time to just update my password as an additional precaution. But I mean, the fact that you got that notice already tells me that the controls are working, which is great. It sucks that people are trying. But it's great that the controls are working. But if you're not someone who's changing your passwords on a regular cadence anyways, it definitely serves as a reminder that, you know what, maybe I should.
Guess I have a homework assignment after this.
That's the one thing I've gotten into is changing the passwords often, though, because I can't remember them anyway. So I've gotten into just changing the password so often.
I want to jump in to ask, are there any specific policies or regulations related to data privacy that Black communities should be advocating for?
I think the number one thing, regardless of your jurisdiction, is always advocate for greater transparency. It is so important, number one, that privacy policies be written in a way that is actually understandable. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be presented in a format that makes sense. Based on the level of information that needs to go into our privacy policies, they're definitely going to be long, but they need to be written in a way that is accessible for everybody, so that we all have a better understanding of how exactly our information is being used. Whether it's a primary purpose or a secondary purpose, we all have a right to know how our information is being used, why it's being used, how it's being collected, all of those things. So I think we should always be advocating for greater transparency. And then separate of that, we should always be advocating for a right to access that information. Knowledge is power, and you have every right to know what information has been collected about you, how it's being used, and what profiles, frankly, have been made using your data and your information. Like, you should always have a right to access whatever information has been collected.
Yes. Also want to ask, are there any emerging technologies or trends in data privacy that could have a significant impact on Black communities in the future?
I mean, I think just AI in general, I can't say that it's just going to have an impact on Black communities, but, artificial intelligence and the introduction of artificial intelligence on the scale that it has been released on, because the reality is we've had AI for quite some time, but now that it is accessible to the masses in a way that it has real life impacts on our day to day, because they've not been tested on this scale before. So it's going to impact all communities in ways, frankly, that we simply haven't prepared for. If we think about the introduction of social media, like 20 years ago, nobody saw all these things coming, right? Like, nobody saw the mental health repercussions and all of those things. Like, it just, you couldn't fathom that 20 years ago, when, like, think like when Facebook came out, like nobody would have thought like we would have ended up here. And it's the same thing that I see realistically with artificial intelligence on this scale, simply because we've not tested it. We don't know all the impacts. I mean, we have insights simply based on the fact that we know what bias looks like, and we know what the negative impacts of bias look like. But we have not seen it on this scale with this level of reach, right? So it's definitely the one that I think we have to be the most aware of, especially when we think about AI is powered by chips, essentially, right? It's powered by these chips. And as the chip technology gets better and increases in its scope and capacity, the AI technology will as well on an exponential level. So it's the thing that we have to be the most conscious of, because if we are not staying on top of all discussions about how we are mitigating against bias in these technologies and making sure that our voices are heard in all communities realistically about how, like when we identify the biases, we need to be on top of calling them out.
Absolutely. Ladies, anything additional?
No, this has been great.
I'm not finished yet. I just putting it out there, though. I got some more questions, but yeah, I'll see if anything else comes up. But Monifa, I also want to ask you, you mentioned earlier on about Black businesses. So conversation piece here, how can Black-owned businesses navigate data privacy concerns while still leveraging technology for growth and success?
I'd say the very first thing is definitely make sure that you have a privacy policy, whether that's something that you've hired someone to do or you've put together yourself. Have a privacy policy that speaks to what you are collecting, why you're collecting it, and how you're using it. Do not copy and paste a privacy policy from somebody else, simply because it is not your organization. It doesn't matter if you operate in the same space or not. It is not your organization. Therefore, you do not want to commit yourself to saying you do these things that you do not do and you do not know about. If they are not about your company, do not put them in your privacy. Privacy policy actually speaks to what you are doing and how you are doing it. That is your first, and I would say your primary, like where you should start is just understanding what you're doing, how you're doing, and make sure that you're communicating that to your public. And then separate of that, you want to make sure that you have the right controls in place to secure that information. So it's not just important that you are telling people what you're doing and how you're doing it. Make sure that you actually have controls in place to secure that information, and make sure that those controls mirror the sensitivity of the information. You can't be collecting sensitive information, especially when it comes to like health records, financial records, and not put proper controls in place to protect that information. Again, I think about 23andMe. That is sensitive health information that was being collected, and you did not have multi-factor authentication.
That's crazy. Benil says companies are requesting more and more personal information online before they indicate they'll give you work. So let me ask then, and that another item comes up with me. We're doing this through laptops or desktops right now, but what about security for these things?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the reasons I have an iPhone is because I like the security controls that go into iPhones. If I could have a BlackBerry still, I would, because I really liked the security that came with those devices. But since that is no longer an option for me, I have migrated to iPhone. I'm not a fan of open platforms, simply because I find anything that has too much open access can always be used for nefarious purposes. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of open platforms. With that being said, you can still use a VPN on your mobile device. There are lots of security tools and features that allow you to have the same level of support on your mobile. And you could also just take a look at, especially check with your telecommunications provider. do they have the software in place that is trying to block out a lot of the spam calls and text messages? Do they have filters for that? There are also a lot of third-party filters that can be used to block those things out. I think about this in the context, like anyone can be scammed and defrauded. That is just a reality, because it has nothing to do with, are you informed and are you aware and do you know what to look for? It has to do with timing. If you could be as aware as you want to be, but maybe that scam call came in at a moment of like high stress and just like you're busy, and that's when you got the call, and it slipped behind the barriers that you had put up to make sure that you could catch something like that. So these things can happen. So I mean, I try to always just look at what are software that can help block out as much of that as is humanly possible.
Wow.
I told you, ladies, she's a real deal.
Yeah.
She's a real deal. Any other comments, conversation? Because Monifa, I hear your voice giving a bit, and I don't want to keep you on too much longer in regards to that. But so as we start coming to a close on the conversation, we've mentioned passwords. Are there any other tips that you'd want to give our family here when it comes to privacy online? You've mentioned a myriad of things, and I'm going to we'll ask you offline to see if you can. I know you did for another conversation, just providing some tips, and we can give it to our Discord group, some top 10 tips. But is there anything else you want to add on to the conversation today before we let you get some rest?
Actually, there is one thing that I did want to share. And I think this is something that I would love for all of our viewers, everyone, to just share within your own family circles and friends. What I have seen within the past few months, I've seen a lot of online attacks targeted to an older age demographic, using a lot of artificial intelligence to try to dupe people into like giving up their life savings. And I do see it specifically targeted an older demographic where, they know to believe what they've seen on TV and on the news and all these things, right? Like that's where they've always gotten their information. And a lot of the AI has been used to mimic news reports. And mimic things that look real and mimic people who, would be trustworthy sources, also that they can get to people's life savings. So, this is conversations that I've had with my own parents and families and friends, just letting them know, like, if you see any of these things, don't do it. Don't click on anything that you've seen on any of these platforms, anything that's, frankly, even if it doesn't sound too good to be true, always try to verify it through another source other than the platform you are on before you make any decisions and before you take any action, right? Again, this just goes back to the trust but verify. That is the age we live in now. You must trust but verify. And if it can't be verified, then you got to leave it alone. It's sad to see a lot of people who have been duped by some of these things. And once that money is gone, it's gone. So the more we can do to just kind of spread that awareness about, how to be more on top of our online activities and presence, and really just trust but verify.
I think that's a good way to close your
Yeah.
Trust and verify. Love that. Monifa, thank you so much for sharing when you're not 100% health-wise with the Primetime Saturday family. Her contact information is on the screen. It's also on any of the platforms that you're watching this, except Lala's. And my LinkedIn, the contact information is there. Thank you as always. I have a feeling we'll be talking between now and Tuesday. And
thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as always, to you and your family, don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and remember to give yourself grace and get better.
That's my plan.
All right. And it's before 9 o'clock, so you can go to bed, because she likes to go to bed before 9 o'clock Eastern time. So, actually, let me just see if there's some. So this is Dr. Ty saying, great info. Thank you. And Jen says, thank you, Monifa. So Hardcore Family is, and Dr. Tashi also said the 23andMe situation is terrible. And Fitness IQ says, rest up. All right. Take care. Be well.
Take care.
Bye-bye. All right, family. There we go.
What wonderful information.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's very, very good. Absolutely. It was, yeah, she is fantastic. And she's really passionate about doing this. And when we first met, she says, you have C-SPAN in the US. She watches the parliamentary channel all day. Like so she's a huge fan of regulation, et cetera, et cetera. So ladies, any take homes or comments from this conversation?
I'm very glad that she said at the end about taking care of our elderly. I know too, in fact, very good friends, parents who thought they were giving their information to the banks because they got text, this new technology, and because it looked like that bank's logo, they gave it, and they ended up being drained. And not only that, getting their social security numbers as well. So now they'll have to continue to monitor their stuff for the rest of their lives, of course. And you're talking about social security money and everything else. So I think we do need to have these conversations with our elderly family and friends, because if we can be fooled and we're pretty savvy with it, then if they are doing it, then it's very easy to target them. So I just really wanted to drive home that.
Yeah, it really is. Same as you, Lala. I've had elderly relatives be duped by these companies because they don't know what to look for, and so yeah, we've got to take care of them, and we've got to take care of the kids too.
Yes, absolutely. So Fitness IQ says, watched the movie Beekeeper. Same thing happened. And Fitness IQ Camp says, thank you for the reminder, Lala. All right. Beautiful. So what we're going to do this a little bit more often. We're going to have friends come in and lay it down, because I know a lot of times some of the stuff we chat about is not inspiring, but we got to chat about it and give our lens. The ladies got to give their lens to it, to give their lens on it. But more and more as we go along, we're going to bring people on and share their passion or subject matter expertise with y'all. Because again, especially on the Fly Moving Community Network, this is information that's generic. Canada, US, around the world, it's generic. And I haven't seen, especially from a Black lens, too many of these conversations happening. So again, huge thanks to Monifa. So we're going to wind it down. And before we wind it down, it's time for what we do. We give them their flowers before they jump off. So last flowers, Lalaki.
You can find me at Living the Lala on all social media platforms. And I want to personally say thank you to my viewers on my pages for your comments and your watching. Please share it out, because this is really good information for everyone.
Absolutely. Aisha K.
I just want to say thank you to Monifa again. I really appreciate that. That was so much great information, and I'm looking forward to our next topical chat like that. So
definitely. Yeah. And myself, this is where you can get a hold of me. Website, the drvibeshow.com. Also YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, the space dr period space vibe space show. Instagram at the drvibeshow, and X at drvibeshow. And also you can watch replays of Primetime Saturday. Got to change. I didn't do it this time. Saturday. It should be Saturday with Aisha LaLa at the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and at the Dr. Vibe Show website. So as we close it down, I'm going to change that Saturday right now. It's bothering me. If I don't change it now, I'm never going to change it. So let me just change it now. Okay. I'm going to prove to you that I changed it. See? The S is off Saturday. It's and thank you, Jen, because Jen's going to remind me. Okay, so we're done there. All right. Final comment that we have here. What a great conversation. Loved it. Thank you, Jen. Much appreciated. So as we close it off, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourselves grace. And we'll get back to regularly scheduled program next episode. All right. God bless. Peace to you well. Keep the faith. And also contact me if there's areas that you like us to have conversations about, a specific topic or genre. We'd love to do it. All right. God bless. Peace to you well. Keep the faith and walk good. And let's wish her you should get better soon. And also Monifa. And Monifa will be back. I know you guys want to have her back. So we'll have her back in the next little while because I'm sure there's more she can share. Be well.